flames had taken everything except the fury burning in Liralay's chest as she stood barefoot in the ash-covered dirt, clutching a pitchfork like a weapon. The bastards who'd torched her farm were long gone, but their laughter still echoed in her ears alongside the dying crackle of what used to be her barn. 3 generations of her family's sweat and dreams reduced to smoldering ruins because she'd refused to sell to some corporate vultures. A truck engine rumbled up the gravel road and Liralay raised the pitchfork higher. If those cowards had come back to gloat, she'd give them something to remember her by. The vehicle stopped at her gate, and out stepped a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and starlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore work boots and jeans that had seen honest labor, not the suits of the men who'd threatened her last week. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough like gravel under rain. "Saw the smoke from the highway. Name's Kazimir Volkov. You hurt?" Liralay's grip tightened on the pitchfork. "What's it to you, stranger?" Instead of backing away from her obvious hostility, Kazimir stepped closer, his eyes scanning the destruction with something that looked like genuine pain. "Lost my family's ranch in a fire when I was 17. I know what that particular kind of hell feels like." Something in his tone made her lower the weapon slightly. "If you're here to offer me pennies on the dollar for the land, you can turn around and I'm here to help rebuild it," he interrupted, pulling work gloves from his back pocket. "No strings attached. It's just a man who knows what it's like to watch everything burn." The audacity of it hit her like a slap. "You don't even know me. Why would you?" "Because someone helped me once when I had nothing left," Kazimir said simply. "And because the bastards who did this are counting on you giving up." Liralay studied his face, searching for deception and finding only steady resolve. The morning sun caught the silver threads in his dark hair, and she noticed the old burn scars on his forearms. This wasn't some savior complex or hidden agenda. This was recognition between 2 people who'd been tested by fire and refused to break. "I don't have money to pay you," she said, hating how her voice cracked. "Didn't ask for any." He gestured toward the ruins. "What do you want to say first?" The question broke something loose in her chest. Not if she wanted to rebuild, but what she wanted to save. As if her determination to rise from these ashes was already a given, she looked at the smoldering remains of her chicken coop, her destroyed vegetable garden, the twisted metal that used to be her irrigation system. "Well," she said finally, "my great-grandfather dug it by hand. If the water's still clean, we can work from there." Kazimir nodded and rolled up his sleeves. "Then let's get started." 3 days later, Liralay discovered that Kazimir Volkov worked like a man possessed. While she'd expected him to disappear after the first day of backbreaking labor, he'd shown up at dawn with coffee, tools, and a quiet determination that matched her own. They'd cleared the debris from around the well, and the water ran clear and sweet, untouched by the flames that had consumed everything else. "You never told me what you do for a living," she said, watching him repair the well's pump mechanism with skilled hands. His shirt was off in the heat, revealing more scars across his back and shoulders. Each one told a story of survival she found herself wanting to hear. "I'm between jobs," he said without looking up. "Was managing a construction crew in Denver. Until last month." "What happened?" His hands stilled on the wrench. "Foreman was cutting corners on a school project. When I reported it, suddenly I was the problem." He resumed his work with perhaps more force than necessary. "Some fights are worth having, even when you know you'll lose." Liralay felt something shift in her chest. Here was a man who'd sacrificed his livelihood for principle, just like she'd sacrificed her farm rather than sell to those corporate sharks. "The crew that torched this place," she said carefully, "they weren't random vandals. They worked for Meridian Development. Been trying to buy my land for months." Kazimir's head snapped up, his gray eyes hardening. "They threaten you directly." In so many words, but their message was clear enough. She gestured at the ruins surrounding them. "Guess they got tired of waiting for my answer. You report it to the police." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Sheriff's nephew works for Meridian. Think he's going to investigate real hard?" She picked up a piece of charred wood and hurled it toward the road. "I'm on my own out here." "No," Casimir said quietly. You're not. The simple statement hit her harder than any grand declaration. She'd been alone for so long, fighting to save the farm after her father's death, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in her corner. The realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. That evening, as they sat on her porch drinking beer and watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Lirelei found herself stealing glances at her mysterious helper. The way he moved, spoke of military training, and the careful way he positioned himself suggested someone accustomed to watching for threats. You're not really just a construction worker, are you? She asked. Casimir was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, Army Rangers. Did 3 tours overseas before I got into construction. Old habits die hard. That why you're helping me? Some kind of mission? He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I'm helping you because watching you fight back reminds me why some things are worth protecting. And because... ... double quotes, seeming to wrestle with something. Because I haven't felt this alive in years. Theshan hung between them like a bridge. Neither was quite ready to cross. Lirelei's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the hunger in his gaze. It's the same desperate need that had been building in her chest every time their hands accidentally touched while working. Casimir, she whispered. He leaned closer, and she could smell sawdust and sweat, and something uniquely him. Tell me to stop, and I will. Instead, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his with 3 days' worth of pent-up longing. The kiss was desperate and sweet, tasting of hope and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lirelei rested her forehead against his. Don't leave, she said. Not yet. Wouldn't dream of it, he murmured against her hair. The attack came at dawn on the 7th day, just as Casimir and Lirelei were raising the frame for a new chicken coop. She heard the vehicles before she saw them, 3 black trucks roaring up her drive like harbingers of hell. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the lead vehicle's driver, Marcus Vex. Meridian Development's head of acquisitions, and the man who'd made her life a nightmare for months. Get behind the house, Casimir ordered, his voice sharp with command. Gone was the gentle man who'd kissed her breathless the night before. In his place stood a warrior assessing threats and calculating odds. Like hell, Lirelei snapped, grabbing the nail gun from their workstation. This is my fight. Casimir's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he positioned himself slightly in front of her as 6 men climbed out of the trucks. Vex swagger over his expensive suit, incongruous against the rural backdrop, flanked by men who looked like they'd been carved from concrete and bad intentions. Miss Thorne, Vex said with false pleasantry. I see you've found yourself a new friend. Touching. Really? But playtime's over. You're trespassing, Lirelei replied, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her throat. Get off my land, Lex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your land? After what happened to your barn, I'd have thought you'd be more reasonable. About our generous offer? You mean after you burned it down, you bastard? Now, no need for accusations. Accidents happen. His cold smile widened, though I'd hate for more accidents to befall your reconstruction efforts. That's when Casimir moved. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he was in Vex's face, moving with predatory grace that made the corporate thugs' bodyguards reach for their weapons. Let me make something clear, Casimir said, his voice deadly quiet. You're going to get back in your trucks and drive away. And if you or your men set foot on this property again, you'll discover that some of us have very specific skill sets. When it comes to dealing with bullies, Vex's face flushed red. You don't know who you're dealing with, boy? I own this county. I own the sheriff, the mayor. Half the Casimir's hand shot out, gripping Vex's throat with enough pressure to cut off his words but not his breathing. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who burns down women's farms and thinks his daddy's money makes him untouchable. The bodyguards raised their weapons, but Casimir didn't flinch. You boys sure you want to do this? 'Cause I've killed better men than you for less. Lirelei's heart hammered as she watched the standoff unfold. These weren't empty threats, she could see the cold calculation in Casimir's eyes. the way he'd positioned himself to use Vex as a human shield if necessary. This was a man who'd walked through war zones and emerged harder than the bullets that had missed him.
You're making?
A mistake, Vex wheezed when Casimir released him. This doesn't end here. No, it doesn't, Casimir agreed. But it ends with you leaving now. Or it ends with me teaching you why Rangers don't leave their posts. The threat hung in the air like smoke. After a long moment, Vex straightened his tie and gestured to his men. This isn't over, Thorn. Not by a long shot. Az! The trucks roared away. Lirelei felt her knees go weak. Casimir caught her arm, his touch gentle now that the immediate threat had passed. They'll be back, she said. I know. He turned to face her, and she saw something fierce and protective blazing in his eyes. But they'll find us ready. That night, as they lay in each other's arms in her small bedroom, Lirelei traced the scars on Casimir's chest with trembling fingers. Their lovemaking had been desperate and passionate, fueled by the knowledge that they were racing against time and powerful enemies. What are we doing? She whispered against his shoulder. Surviving, he said simply, together. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, engines rumbled in the dark. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn quiet like a thunderclap, throwing Lirelei from sleep and into Casimir's arms as her bedroom window sprayed glass across the floor. They rolled off the bed together, his body instinctively shielding hers as debris rained down from the ceiling. The generator, she gasped, recognizing the metallic temps of gasoline and burning wire in the air. They blew up the generator. Casimir was already moving, pulling on his jeans and grabbing the rifle he'd started keeping by the bed. Stay low, move to the back of the house. But Lirelei was done being protected. She yanked on her clothes and grabbed her father's old shotgun from the closet. I told you before, cowboy, this is my fight too. They crept through the house together, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization born of shared danger and deepening trust. Through the kitchen window, they could see flames licking at the remains of their power source, while shadowy figures moved through the smoke like demons. 4 of them, Casimir whispered, his voice clinical despite the fury burning. In his eyes, spread out in formation. These aren't random vandals? Professional? Lirelei asked, though she already knew the answer. Ex-military, most likely. Vex isn't playing games anymore, a voice called out from the darkness beyond the flames. Thorn, you've got 5 minutes to come out and sign the papers, or we start. On the house next, Lirelei's grip tightened on the shotgun. Over my dead body? That can be arranged, came the mocking reply. Casimir's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers warm and steady. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly, about why I'm really here. Her heart skipped. I wasn't just passing through when I saw the smoke. I was already watching your place. He met her eyes, and she saw guilt warring with determination. My unit. We've been tracking Meridian development for months. They're not just a construction company. They're a front for something bigger, something that gets people killed. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. You're still military, private contractor. But yes, he cupped her face in his hands. I came here to investigate Lirelei, but I stayed because of you. Because watching you fight made me remember what I was fighting for. Before she could respond, the front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. 2 figures in. Tactical gear stormed through, automatic weapons raised. Lirelei fired the shotgun without thinking, the blast catching the lead intruder in the chest and sending him flying backward. Casimir was moving before the echoes faded, his rifle speaking, in precise, measured shots that dropped the second intruder before he could fire. The kitchen, he shouted, grabbing Lirelei's hand and pulling her toward the back door. They burst out into the night just as the remaining attackers converged on the house. Lirelei's heart pounded as they ran for the cover of the rebuilt chicken coop bullets, whining past their heads like angry wasps. The well, Casimir said, breathing hard. It's defensible, and I cached some supplies there yesterday. They sprinted across the open ground, Lirelei's bare feet finding purchase on the familiar earth. Even in the chaos, behind them, the house erupted in flames as someone triggered an incendiary device. My father's photographs, she gasped, watching her last connection to family turn to ash. Everything, ... I'm sorry, Casimir said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm so damn sorry I brought this down on you. They reached the well's stone circle just as muzzle flashes erupted from the tree line. Casimir returned fire with mechanical precision while Lirelei worked to uncover the weapons cache he'd hidden. Military-grade rifles, ammunition, and communications. Equipment. Who are you really? She asked, as she loaded a fresh magazine. Someone who's tired of watching good people get crushed by monsters, he replied, never taking his eyes off the approaching threats. Someone who's found something worth dying for. The words hung between them as the final battle began in earnest. Whatever happened next, whatever secrets remained between them, they would face it together. The farm might be burning again, but this time, Lirelei wasn't alone. And this time, she wasn't running. The federal agents arrived like an army of ghosts, their black SUVs materializing from the morning mist, just as Lirelei thought she and Casimir were about to be overrun. She watched from their defensive position behind the well as tactical teams swarmed the remaining attackers. Their movements precise and overwhelming. Cavalry's here, Casimir said, lowering his rifle with visible relief. About damn time, friends. Of yours? Lirelei asked, still gripping her shotgun. After a night of revelations and gunfire, she wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Better than that, they're the good guys. He stood slowly, hands visible, as a woman in a tactical vest approached. Agent Valdez. Wasn't sure you'd make it in time. The agent, a sharp-eyed Latina who moved with predatory grace, surveyed the carnage with professional detachment. Your message said the situation was escalating. Looks like you understated things. Her gaze shifted to Lirelei. Ms. Thorne, I'm sorry about your property. I'm sorry we couldn't move sooner. Move on? What? Lirelei demanded, anger finally overriding shock. Will someone please tell me what the hell is going on? Agent Valdez exchanged a look with Casimir, who nodded grimly. Meridian Development is a shell company for an international arms trafficking ring. They've been using eminent domain and intimidation to acquire properties near military bases and shipping routes. Your farm sits on what they need for their final operation. Arms trafficking? Lirelei's voice cracked. They burned down my barn over weapons dealing. Not just weapons, Casimir said quietly. Stolen military hardware. The kind that ends up in the hands of terrorists and enemy states. He holstered his sidearm and moved closer to her. The attack on your farm was meant to be the final push to get you to sell. When you refused, they decided to eliminate the problem permanently. The weight of it crashed over her. All those months of threats and escalation, she'd thought she was fighting for her family's legacy. In reality, she'd been standing between monsters and their money. The question now, Agent Valdez continued, is what you want to do next. We can relocate you, give you a new identity, or ... or we finish what we started here. Casimir's voice was steady, but she could hear the hope underneath. Meridian's network is bigger than just Vex, but with your help, we can bring down the whole operation. My help? You've seen their methods firsthand. You know their playbook. Agent Valdez pulled out a tablet, showing surveillance photos of men in expensive suits. We need someone on the inside. Someone they think they've beaten. Lirelei stared at the images, recognizing faces from the development company's legal meetings. You want me to pretend to sell to them? More than that? I want you to become their partner? Make them think you're interested in their real business? Casimir moved closer, his gray eyes intense. It's dangerous as hell, and I'd understand if you said no. But if we pull this off, we'll cut the head off a snake that's been poisoning communities across the country. The morning sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the remains of her farm. Her father's house was gone, her barn was ash, and her carefully tended fields were scarred with tire tracks and bullet holes. But the land itself remained scarred but unbroken. What about us? She asked quietly, looking at Casimir. Was any of it real? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion and hope warring in his expression. Every moment, every kiss. Every night we spent planning how to Rebuild this place. His hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her own. I came here on a mission, but I stayed because of you. Because somewhere between clearing debris and watching you fight, I fell in love with the strongest woman I've ever met. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Casimir, I know I don't have the right to ask, he continued, but when this is over, I want to help you rebuild. Not just the farm, but everything. Together. Agent Valdez cleared her throat diplomatically. We need an answer, Miss Thorne. Meridian's leadership is spooked by what happened here. They'll either cut and run, or they'll accelerate their timeline. Either way, we're running out of time. Lirelei looked around at the destruction, then back at Casimir's face. This man had risked everything to stand with her, had held her through the darkest moments of her life. If he was willing to fight for something bigger than both of them, maybe she could too. What do you need me to do? The Meridian Development headquarters gleamed like a steel and glass monument to corporate greed, its reflective surface hiding the rot within. Lirelei adjusted her blazer and checked her reflection in the lobby's polished marble, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Gone were her work boots and jeans, replaced by a designer suit that cost more than most people. Made in a month. The transformation was Agent Valdez's idea. Make them think she'd been broken, that she was ready to join the winning side. Remember? Casimir's voice whispered through the nearly invisible earpiece. You're not the same woman who fought them off a week ago. You're desperate, scared, and willing to deal. They'll eat it up. She nodded slightly, knowing he was watching. From the surveillance van parked across the street, the past week had been a whirlwind of briefings, rehearsals, and stolen moments between them. Each night, she'd fallen asleep in his arms, drawing strength from his presence while preparing for the most dangerous performance of her life. The elevator whisked her to the 37th floor, where Marcus Vex waited in his corner office, like a spider in the center of his web. His smile was predatory as she entered, but she caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He'd expected her to be broken, not transformed. Thorne. I have to say, I'm impressed. After our last encounter, I wasn't sure you'd be willing to have a civilized conversation. Civilized is all I have left, she replied, keeping her voice steady. Your people made that clear. Vex gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. Please, sit. Can I offer you something? Coffee? Water? Information? She said simply. About the real business? His smile widened. I'm not sure I follow. Cut the shit, Vex. I know Meridian isn't just about property development. It's the weapons, the international connections, the military contracts. She leaned forward, letting calculated desperation creep into her voice. I want in. For a moment, the mask slipped, and she saw the calculating predator underneath. That's a very serious accusation, Miss Thorne. One that could get you in considerable trouble. It's more trouble than having my farm burned down, than being shot at by professional killers. She laughed bitterly. I'm already in trouble. Question is whether I'm smart enough to profit from it. Vex was quiet for a long moment, studying her like a chess master contemplating his next move. Finally, he pressed a button on his desk. Send him in. The door opened to admit a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and bad intentions. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of scars that spoke of violence survived rather than avoided. But it was his eyes that made her blood run cold flat. Emotionless, like staring into the abyss. Miss Thorne, meet Colonel Dmitry Kozlov, retired Russian Spetsnaz, current head of our international operations.
Axe!
Vex's smile was triumphant. If you're serious about joining our organization, you'll need to prove yourself to him. Kozlov's accent was thick as motor oil. Americans always so eager to make profit from others' misery. Tell me, little farm girl, what makes you think you have the stomach for our kind of work? 'Cause I've already lost everything, she replied, meeting his dead gaze without flinching. When you have nothing left to lose, you'll do anything to survive. Touching. But survival requires more than desperation. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, gun oil and old blood. It requires the will to do what others cannot, to cross lines that cannot be uncrossed. Try me. Love's laugh was like breaking glass. Very well. Tomorrow night we have a shipment coming through your former property. Weapons bound for clients who appreciate their quality. You will be there to oversee the transfer. If you can handle that without losing your nerve, I'll be there, she said without hesitation. Excellent. Vex leaned back in his chair, clearly pleased with how the meeting was progressing. I knew you were a smart woman, Miss Thorne, much smarter than your ... former associate. Her blood turned. To ice? What do you mean? Your boyfriend, the construction worker? Casimir, wasn't it? Vex's smile turned vicious. Did you really think we wouldn't investigate him? Former Army Ranger? Current federal contractor? He's been watching us for months? The world tilted and she fought to keep her expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Don't worry. We'll be taking care of that problem very soon. Vex stood, straightening his tie. Colonel Kozlov's people are quite skilled at making problems disappear. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain calm. If you're expecting me to work with you, I need to know I can trust you. That means no more. Surprises. Trust is earned, Miss Thorne. Tomorrow night, you'll have your chance to earn ours. Vex moved to the window, looking out over the city. Welcome to the real world. Think you'll find it much more profitable than farming. As she left the building, her mind raced. They knew about Casimir, which meant the entire operation was compromised, which meant everyone she'd come to care about was in danger, and she was walking into a trap with no way to warn them, the abandoned. Airstrip stretched into the darkness like a scar across the earth, its cracked asphalt bearing witness. 2 decades of neglect. Lyra lay crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, her heart hammering as she watched the organized chaos of the arms transfer unfold. Vehicles moved like shadows, their headlights cutting through the mountain mist, while men unloaded crates. Marked with Cyrillic letters, Venus, report, Agent Valdez's voice crackled through her earpiece. What's your status? I count 20 hostiles, heavily armed. The shipment's bigger than we expected. She adjusted her position, trying to get a better view of the operation, and there's something else. They know about Casimir. Static filled her earpiece before Valdez responded. Say again? I made him. Vex as good as told me they're planning to eliminate him. Her voice cracked despite her efforts to remain professional. We need to abort. Negative. We're too close. To shut down now. The entire network depends on this shipment reaching its destination. Valdez's tone was clinical, but Lyra caught the underlying tension. Maintain your cover. We'll handle the rest. But as she watched Kozlov directing his men with military precision, she knew they were walking into a massacre. The Russian had positioned snipers on the surrounding hills, and the vehicles were arranged in a defensive formation that would make any assault a bloodbath. Where's Casimir? She asked, desperation creeping into her voice. En route with the tactical team, ETA 5 minutes. 5 minutes that might as well have been 5 hours. She could see Vex approaching her position, his smile visible even in the darkness. Behind him walked 2 men she didn't recognize, their movements suggesting they were there for one purpose only. Miss Thorne, Vex called out. Time for your final test. She stood slowly, her hands visible, but ready to reach for the pistol hidden beneath her jacket. I'm here, aren't I? Indeed. But Colonel Kozlov has some concerns about your ... commitment. Vex's smile widened. He believes the best way to prove loyalty is through blood. One of the men behind him stepped forward, dragging a bound and gagged figure into the light. Her world tilted as she recognized the battered-faced Casimir. Bloodied but alive, his gray eyes blazing with fury and something else. Love. He was looking at her with such fierce protective love that it took her breath away. You son of a bitch, she whispered ... double quotes. Now, no need for dramatics. Vex produced a pistol from his jacket and held it out to her. Kill him, and you're one of us. Refuse, and you both die anyway. Her hand trembled as she reached for the weapon. Around them, the arms transfer continued, but she could sense the attention of Kozlov's men focusing on the drama unfolding. She met Casimir's eyes, seeing the slight nod he gave her. Trust. Even now, even facing death, he trusted her completely. I'm sorry, she whispered, raising the pistol. For what? Vex asked, confusion flickering across his face. "For this," she said, and shot him center mass. The night erupted in chaos. Lyrilla dove for cover as Kozlov's men opened fire, their muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. She heard the distinctive crack of sniper rifles from the hills. But the shots were coming from the wrong direction, incoming rather than outgoing. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The voice echoed across the airstrip, amplified by electronic speakers. Spotlights blazed to life, turning night into artificial day and revealing federal agents advancing from multiple directions. The tactical team Valdez had promised was here, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Lyrilla crawled toward where Casimir had fallen, her heart in her throat. She found him struggling against his bonds, very much alive despite the blood on his face. "You beautiful, crazy woman," he gasped as she cut him free. "I thought you were going to actually shoot me. Trust me." The thought crossed my mind. She handed him a spare pistol from her ankle holster. "Can you move? Just watch me." They fought their way through the chaos together, two people who'd found something worth dying for in each other. Round them, the arms smuggling operation crumbled as federal agents systematically dismantled Kozlov's network. But the Russian himself was nowhere to be found. "He's running," Casimir said, pointing toward a helicopter spinning up on the far side of the airstrip. "We can't let him escape." He sprinted across the open ground, bullets whining past their heads. The helicopter was already lifting off as they reached it, but Lyrilla had one shot. She raised her pistol and fired at the fuel tank. Praying her aim was true, the explosion lit up the night sky like a small sun, and she felt Casimir's arms wrap around her, pulling her down as debris rained from above. When the smoke cleared, the helicopter was a twisted wreck, and Colonel Kozlov's reign of terror was over. 3 months later, Lyrilla stood in the doorway of her rebuilt farmhouse, watching Casimir work on the new barn. Had been generous in their compensation, and with the insurance money, they'd been able to rebuild everything better than before. But the real treasure wasn't the buildings or the land, it was the man who'd chosen to stay and build a life with her. "You know," she called out, "most women meet their husbands at church or work. I had to get mixed up with international arms dealers." He looked up from his work, that slow smile spreading across his face. "Worth it?" She walked over to him, noting how the evening light caught the gold band on his left hand. "Ask me in 50 years. "I will," he promised, pulling her into his arms. "Every day for 50 years. What?" And as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lyrilla knew she'd found something worth more than all the land in the world. She'd found home in the arms of a man who'd helped her rebuild not just her farm, but her faith in the future. The farm that had been burned down twice now stood stronger than ever, rooted in soil that had been tested by fire and watered with blood. But it was the love growing between its walls that made it truly unbreakable. Some things, once destroyed, come back stronger. And some people, once they find each other, can rebuild anything.